Good day. It's JJ MMA. Today, we are going to be making a video on if they were a fruit. If each of these fighters that I'm going to be talking about, if they were a fruit, and by a fruit, I mean like the fruit that you eat, like an apple, banana, pear, strawberry, blueberry, mango, orange. The list goes on of the type of fruit that each of these fighters could be. But what would they be if they just, woke up one day and they were a fruit? What would each of these fighters be that are going to be on this tier list? As we go down the list and as we talk about each fighter that we're going to bring up on this list, I will explain to you why each of these fighters fall into each of these categories of different fruits. So starting off with the first guy I'm going to put on this tier list, Ilia Topuria. I think that Ilia Topuria, I'm going to say that Ilia Topuria would be a strawberry because, when you think about it, you think about his fight style. Like the criteria that I'm going to be, putting into consideration here is like fight style and personality. Most of all, I'd say fight style and personality. And his personality is kind of like, he's arrogant. I feel like you look at a strawberry, there's some arrogance to the strawberry, like, oh yeah, I'm the sweetest fruit, I'm the best fruit, and when he gets in there, he backs it up. These strawberries, what they do is like when you bite into them, when you taste the material that they are keeping inside themselves, and they're growing with that, that taste, the growing equals the training, like the growing of the strawberry is like the training of the fighter, and how it actually plays out inside the octagon. And Ilia Topuria backs it up, 17 times out of 18, he backs it up inside the octagon. You could say 17 and a half because he nearly had Justin Gaethje finished, but just couldn't put the cherry on top. So I feel like Ilia Topuria is a strawberry. The personality, he's very arrogant. The back of the flouty, mounty, clouty, shut up. And he's always, saying, I'm going to knock you out in the first round. Justin, there's not going to be a second or third round. Turned out there was, but I feel like Ilia Topuria is a strawberry. Next up on this tier list, going from one of my favorite fighters to my least favorite fighter, Ciryl Gane. I think that Ciryl Gane would be a pair, and I'm going to tell you why. Ciryl Gane, even though, he's a pretty good fighter inside the octagon, he lost to Volkov, cheats in almost every fight, should be in prison, but Ciryl Gane, outside the octagon, he is a very bland human, doesn't really say much, partially because he doesn't speak very good English. If you hear him at press conferences, he's struggling to put sentences together, and he's been, training in America, or I guess he trains in France, but he's been, around America for a long time, still can't put together English sentences, like, at all. And he's also 36 years of age, and his personality is just very, very bland. Laughs at things that shouldn't be laughed at, laughs at what he's saying himself. I don't know if you guys haven't heard that clip of him saying, it's not a choke, and then he's all of a sudden starts cracking up for some reason, even though what he said was not funny. But yeah, Ciryl Gane, I feel like he'd be a pair, partially just because I hate him, and I don't really like pears as a fruit, so I feel like Ciryl Gane would be a pair. Next up on this tier list, or on this list, I'm just putting this in a tier list format because I think that would be easiest to portray each guy. I don't want to really make, a Google slide with, oh, this guy, I'm going to put a picture of JDM and then next to him is so-and-so. We'll get to JDM on this tier list, but Mauricio Huffy is the next guy I'm actually going to put on this tier list yet. And I just look at Mauricio Huffy and I think Mauricio Huffy would be a banana. It's just like kind of about, the way he looks. Like he's got that long, lanky, skinny frame for lightweight. He's a 6 foot tall lightweight, very rangy. And, he's a banana, man. He's all limbs. His personality, very humble. I feel like a banana most of the time I don't know. It really depends, man. Because you're going to see some bananas in this tier list that are going to be, more rash and more arrogant than the other bananas, you know what I'm saying? Or more loud. But Mauricio Huffy, I feel like he's mostly a banana just because he looks like it. And yeah, I don't really have much more of an explanation. His fight style kind of seems like how a banana would fight inside the octagon, you know what I'm saying? Just putting together all the spindly, real crafty, finishing moves like the spinning back kicks. Very smooth like a banana. Bananas are very smooth for the most part, unless you get like a really bruised banana. I hate bruised bananas. I'm a very picky banana eater, but yeah, Mauricio Huffy's a banana. Partially also, I put Mauricio Huffy in the banana section because I saw Lucas Tracy's video in the thumbnail called the biodegradable banana. Lucas Tracy's quite the character, but yeah, I think that Mauricio Huffy's a banana. All right, dude, next up, I'm gonna put, who am I gonna put in this tier list next? Oh yeah, Michael Morales. Michael Morales. I feel like Michael Morales would be an orange, man. And I'm going to explain to you why I think Michael Morales would be an orange. You know what I'm saying? Like, you look at how this guy, conducts himself outside the octagon, and it's mostly, shown by how he dresses, how he presents himself, because he doesn't speak a lick of English. All of what he says during press conferences is in Spanish, but the thing that jumps out to you is his peacocking. You know what I'm saying? And I said that for lack of a better term, but to explain what peacocking means in the sense of Miles Morales, not Miles Morales, that's Spider-Man, in the sense of Michael Morales, is, he's got the bleached hair, lots of tattoos. He jumps up on stage at the UFC 322 press conference with like a purple fur coat. You know what I'm saying? So he's very zesty. And you know what's zesty? An orange is very zesty in taste. So I feel like that's a perfect analogy to put Michael Morales in this orange tier. You're going to see some other zesty fellas in this orange tier as well. But some of them actually aren't. Some of them are just oranges based off of their fight style or, different things. A lot of these fruits, on this tier list may vary, you know what I'm saying? So Michael Morales, very zesty orange, dresses interestingly, talks interestingly. His Spanish sounds a bit zesty as well, but I don't know, maybe that's just an Ecuadorian thing. But all right, dude, next up on this tier list, Carlos Ulberg. Where do I put Carlos Ulberg? Oh, I know exactly where to put him. Carlos Ulberg is a pair for sure. And it's not because of his fight style, because his fight style is way more exuberant than a pair. It's because, and I've said this many times before, I've said this on live a lot of times, I've said this in videos a lot of times where I've included Carlos Ulberg in this video, but he conducts himself during press conferences and during media obligations like he absolutely hates his job. He'll be having to answer questions at a media day, and he's just like, yeah, man, I do. And almost started talking like Islam Makhachev. He's like, I do this, yeah, man, yeah. And he's just like, he's kind of just like, he's very bland when he talks. He's got no personality. He's got no soul, man. Carlos Ulberg has no soul, and I feel like a pear is a very soulless fruit, you know what I'm saying? And that's kind of why I put Cyril Gane here as well, because it's just like, you look at a pear and it's just like, oh, it's a pear. And then you bite into it and it's just like, it tastes like spinach, bro. It just tastes like a leaf with a bit of juice in it. And I feel like that's Carlos Ulberg when he's, conducting himself outside of the octagon. But inside the octagon, if we were basing this solely on fight style and not on personality, not on, like for Michael Morales, how he dresses, or for Mauricio Huffy, how he looks with his physique, then Carlos Ulberg would be something very sweet that jumps at you, like a strawberry or a mango or something like that. But, Carlos Ulberg's a pear, man. You know what I'm saying? You bite into a pear and it tastes like leaves, man. It tastes like you're biting into a fall pile of crunchy leaves. So, yeah, I'm going to put Carlos Ulberg in the pear tier. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Paddy Pimblett. Now we're getting to someone with some personality. Now I'm going to put him in the banana tier. And I feel like Paddy Pimblett's a banana, partially because of how he looks. Paddy Pimblett looks like a banana. You got the blonde hair, a little bit of yellow skin going on here along with the blonde hair, which makes him look more yellow naturally. Paddy Pimblett, he kind of fights like a banana as well. Bananas are, very flexible. If you maybe grip it too hard, it's going to fall apart. And I feel like, that flexibility of a banana compared to these other fruits here, like these other fruits here on this tier list are not flexible. Apple, very stiff. Pear, very stiff for the most part. Strawberry, stiff. Blueberry, very small, stiff. Mangoes are stiff. Oranges are, kind of squishy, but they're stiff. But a banana has a lot of flexibility to it, and so does Paddy Pimblett. If you look at his submissions, I'm like a fucking spadalad. The way that he wrapped up Benoit Saint-Denis in that, the padlock. We're calling it the padlock, by the way. I know he wants to call it the pad thai, but that doesn't make any sense. I don't think. But yeah, Paddy Pimblett's a banana. He's very flexible, very exuberant. I feel like bananas, you look at a ripe, kind of greenish yellow banana, it's very exuberant. It stands out to you. So I feel like Paddy Pimblett is a banana. His personality, very flashy, stands out. And yeah, he looks like a banana as well. And he, fights like a banana. So we're going to put Paddy Pimblett as a banana. You know what I'm saying? Next up on this tier list, JDM. Yeah, JDM. I think JDM would be a mango, and a lot of you guys are going to be surprised by me saying that JDM would be a mango, because you bite into a mango, it's very sweet, this taste of a mango stands out to you. But JDM, you know what, I know some people may think that a mango is like a kind of a weird fruit to put, group with these other fruits. A lot of these other groups of fruits are pretty mainstream, except for a pear. I feel like a pear ain't too mainstream, but a mango goes under the radar. JDM is a fighter who goes under the radar because of how quiet and reserved he is. He's just like at a press conference, he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go out and win. Like, yeah, obviously you're gonna try to go out and win. You're a UFC fighter for a reason. You're trying to fight for your money, Ben. The little money that Dana pays you. But I feel like, yeah, JDM he's just at the press conference giving like very short sentence answers, like 1-sentence answers, and then he's done. Quite bland with his personality, but the difference in JDM is he's just very quiet and reserved, but he's still very liked because of how his fight style is. And, he's got crisp boxing. Sometimes, he'll rip the one-liners like, I don't think that's Ian San. You know what I'm saying? JDM's a mango, man. So I feel, yeah, he goes under the radar. Mangoes go under the radar as well as a fruit group. Dude, why am I making this video? I've completely ran out of ideas. If they were fruit, what would each of these UFC fighters be, man? Yeah, JDM's a mango. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker is next up on this tier list, man. I think Dan Hooker would be an orange, and I'm grouping him with his fellow zesty brother down here, Michael Morales, because Dan Hooker is a very zesty individual. Besides the Dan Hooker files, you could kind of tell with it before, you know what I'm saying? Out of nowhere gets, the bleached hair, all these interesting tattoos, and I have bleached hair myself right now, but, bleaches his hair, like, permanently, all these tattoos. He's covering his body with tattoos when he had no tattoos, like early in his career. Cheating on his wife. if this Kiwi NZ swingers, whatever his alias is on this like this LGBTQ dating app or whatever the hell he's doing. I know it's probably not real, because he's like came out and denied it, but originally he wasn't denying it, man. He was just like laughing at it, like, oh yeah, hey lad, hey, these silly lads, hey, they're silly, man, they think I'm gay, what do they know about me, hey, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like Dan Hooker's an orange. He's zesty like that. He's zesty like Michael Morales. Regardless of whether or not the Dan Hooker files are true, he's always been a bit of a zesty fella. He's in the corner. Hey, man, I love this shit. Hey, I love this shit, man. The fighting shit, man. Hey. So I think that Dan Hooker is an orange as a fruit. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Max Holloway. Max Blessed Holloway. He is going to be our first inhabitant of the apple tier. I feel like Max Holloway is quite the apple, you know what I'm saying? Like, you look at this big noggin on here and you're kind of looking at you're looking at more of a coconut, actually. But Max Holloway's got one hell of a noggin on there. It's probably why he's had such a good chin for so long. But yeah, I mean, I feel like Max Holloway's an apple. His personality, it kind of looks bland to you, like an apple. He is what he is. What do it do, brother? We're gonna find out Saturday night. He's kind of just, his personality is pretty bland, like an apple. But then, you see him in the octagon, he's an absolute beast, man. Constant volume, shit talking you while he's fighting. I'm the best boxer in UFC, baby. And then he's like, slipping all of Calvin Kattar's punches. He's like, I'm the best boxer. And then he points down, Max Holloway's an apple, because when you bite into an apple, you're hit with, an apple juice taste, because obviously it is an apple. And apple juice is made out of apples, obviously. I shouldn't have to clarify that, but yeah, I feel like when you watch Max Holloway's fights, when you bite into the apple, the content of the apple, as long as it's a Honeycrisp apple, like Max Holloway, because there are lots of types of apples, yeah. Like, there aren't many types of bananas, but Max Holloway's a Honeycrisp apple, because when you bite into that Honeycrisp apple, it's, it's sweet, it's just sweet enough, but then it's also like, it just tastes very clean to you. It tastes like you're eating something that's real, you know? Like there's a big difference between McDonald's slop apples and then like a nice Honeycrisp apple that you get from Whole Foods, you know what I'm saying? For those of you that shop at Whole Foods in America, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think that Max Holloway is for sure an apple. Yeah, man. I don't know, something about Max Holloway also makes me think he looks like an apple too, for whatever reason. I think it's the big old hollow noggin on him. So anyways, we're gonna move on to the next fruit on this tier list. Derek Lewis, man. I feel like Derek Lewis would just be this big gelatinous blueberry, man. I just have this feeling, you know, he'd just be a juicy, you know, one of those big old blueberries that, you know, like, you know, the smaller the blueberry, you know, like the zestier it tastes. But then, like, the bigger the blueberry, you know, it tastes a bit more, you know, like grainy. I don't know, like it tastes more like rice for some reason. And Derek Lewis would just be like that big gelatinous blueberry just rolling around your fruit bowl. You know what I'm saying? Like, you may want to disregard the blueberry, but then, you know, it's just that big gelatinous blueberry and it's rolling around your fruit bowl. And you know, blueberries are superfoods, so you want to eat that blueberry. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like Derek Lewis would just be this big gelatinous round, rotund. I'm just throwing him in now. This big gelatinous round, rotund, very juicy blueberry rolling around your fruit bowl, and you would eat it. You know, originally you wouldn't originally be more focused on maybe the yogurt if it's there, or the strawberries, you know, that jump out more at you with the flavor, you know, but then you just have old Derek Lewis plodding around your fruit bowl. And you just want to eat that blueberry, man. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, God, what the hell am I doing? Arman Sarukian, man. Arman Sarukian, this one's pretty obvious to me. I think Apple Sarukian is the new name for Arman Sarukian, just for the scenario of this tier list right here, man. Apple Sarukian. I feel like Apple Sarukian would definitely be an apple. Arman's kind of more, I feel like he's more of like a, what are those, like, they're like kind of red still. Yeah, he's more like a Fuji apple because of the taste, you know. I know my apples, guys. I feel like Arman Sarukian would be more of a Fuji apple because, you know, like the Fuji apple, it still looks red, you know, it still looks like an apple. And then you look at the apple and be like, oh, that's a good apple. But then you bite into it and that Fuji apple tastes more like a pear. You know what I'm saying? And that's, I don't know. It's kind of the deal with Arman Sarukian, except his fights are pretty entertaining. He does have entertaining enough wrestling for, you know, it's watchable. Unlike Makhachev laying and praying in some of his fights, you know, even when he's on the back, kind of laying and praying with Volk, even though Volk's very hard to submit. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like Apple Sarukian, he'd be a Fuji apple because, you know, you bite into the apple. You know, it's not like he doesn't really have that personality that jumps out at you. Like it's kind of a vice versa thing with Max Holloway here as a fellow apple. Like, you look at the apple with Max Holloway, like you look at a Honeycrisp and you're like, oh yeah, it's an apple. You know, I know what it's going to taste like. But then you bite into a Honeycrisp and you're like, oh, this is a good apple. And then you realize, like, then you condition yourself to think, oh, that's a Honeycrisp apple and it's going to taste like that. You know, you look at that Honeycrisp apple and you're like, oh, this apple is going to taste good when you're looking at Arman Sarukian. What the hell am I talking about? And then, you know, you bite into that Fuji apple and then you're like, oh, this kind of tastes like shit, man. It's, you know, more bland than I thought. But yeah, I mean, Arman Sarukian has a big personality now, I guess. You know, he's a kick streamer now, RAF wrestler, basically anything but fighting inside the octagon. But he does have a fight booked, so, you know, at least that's good. But Apple Sarukian, man, I don't got much else to say. You could make an argument for any of these other fruits, but I don't really care to make much more of an argument. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Magomed Ankalaev. Dude, I think this is pretty obvious, you know, off the tone of this tier list so far, where I'm going to put Magomed Ankalaev. And I'm going to say Magomed Ankalaev is quite the pair. So, you know, and I feel like it kind of explains itself, you know. Ankalaev, very boring fight style. Even though, you know, most of his fights are standing up, he doesn't really look for the finish. Like, he had that rear naked choke on Bogdan Guskov about 4 times in that 4th round. You know, didn't take any opportunities for it. Yeah, and I just feel like that boring fight style would transfer over to him if he became a fruit. And if he became a fruit, he would be a pear. And that's because of pear, you bite into that pear, and it's very bland. You know, it kind of tastes like spinach. You know, it tastes like, you know, a vegetable without, any flavor to it, like a broccoli without butter or ranch or whatever it is that you want to put on broccoli. But yeah, I think that Magomed Ankalaev would be a pair. I don't got much else explaining to do. All right, dude. Next up on this list, Peyton Talbot. I'm going to say Peyton Talbot. Wait a second. Because we got a few options here. He could be an orange because he is quite the zesty fella. But, he is not with Frank Ocean. So people who are taking that seriously don't take it seriously anymore. He has a kid on the way, or a kid that's just been born. But I don't really think that he blends in with Michael Morales or Dan Hooker all that much. I think he is kind of a strawberry, and this may be a hot take, but I think he does blend in with Ilya. And I know the gay allegations that came out about Ilya recently, but he's obviously not gay. But yeah, Peyton Talbot, man. I think that he'd be more of a strawberry because the strawberry, like you look at that strawberry and you're like, oh, the strawberry is gonna be sweet. You know what I'm saying? Like, not saying anything about Peyton Talbot, man, but this strawberries, it's gonna, it's zesty. It's gonna jump out with you with the flavor. You know what I'm saying? When you bite into it, and when you look at Peyton Talbot's fight style, the look of the strawberry and, the look of Peyton Talbot, with the tattoo down his leg, the black hole through his chest with the tattoo, all of that performativeness and the skateboarding and the DJing and, all the stuff that Peyton Talbot does outside the cage and all, the aesthetics of Peyton Talbot, to put it in that term. He backs it all up inside the cage. He fights like he acts, and he's a nasty fighter. He's got really nice kicks, sharp kickboxing. He can finish you at any moment if you're not careful enough. He was beating the shit out of Henry Cejudo, who is like one of the craftier vets in the game, and he was still pretty damn good. And I think that he was making it pretty damn competitive with Song Yadong as well, who is a good fighter in the bantamweight division. All of them are quite good, but yeah, Peyton Talbot's a strawberry, vibrant personality, not that big of a shit talker, but a very vibrant personality nonetheless, skateboarding, DJing, his extracurriculars, he's always doing something new, it seems like. And, he's a very interesting person, and a strawberry is a very interesting fruit, in my opinion. So that's why I have Peyton Talbot as a strawberry. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Tom Aspinall. I think that Tom Aspinall is another guy that goes under the radar, man, and he blends right in with JDM. He's a mango. I think that Tom Aspinall is a mango. You know what I'm saying? Oh, fucking hell, I'm a mango now, mate. He is a mango. He's a mango with his fellow mango brethren, JDM. And I feel like these guys do just kind of blend together, because Tom Aspinall, a very soft-spoken guy, could have went after Jones way harder than he did for all the things that Jones has been caught up with in his career. And he didn't. Tom Aspinall's a very, very nice, respectful dude. He's put up with a lot of shit from the UFC. And, he's another guy that does go under the radar despite being the champion. He's a guy that goes under the radar like a mango. And that's because, he's not talking all that much. He's not doing all that promotion for himself. But, once you bite into a mango's very sweet. You get that, you understand like the flavor of a mango, and it just jumps right at you. And that's Tom Aspinall when he fights. Once he gets into the octagon, he's a very, kill mode that switches on type of fighter. Throws a 1-2 with his chin up in the air, and it chins his opponents. Caught Sergey Pavlovich bad and slept him when Sergey Pavlovich was on tear and was like looking like the boogeyman of the heavyweight division. And Aspinall did that on a week's notice as well. And, catches Curtis Blades inside a minute, puts out Curtis Blades inside a minute in England. This guy, once he gets in the cage, he's going to finish you, unless you're Cyril Gane and you're a very good fighter. But like right away, once you step in that cage, if you're not like a Cyril Gane, who's a very, very skilled fighter and is defensively sound for the most part, moving like a cat, very nimble, getting out of range. I hate Cyril Gane and I hate praising him, but he's a very good fighter inside the octagon. But like, if you're not that skilled, you're there to be hit and finished and KO'd and slept out cold. hit with a big right by Tom Aspinall, you know what I'm saying? And he goes under the radar despite being such an entertaining fighter because a lot of people hate on him. A lot of people like to hate on JDM and Tom Aspinall, even though they're very reserved, nice guys, and they like to praise guys like fucking Cyril Gahn, bro. It's absolutely disgusting. MMA fans are terrible. But yeah, Tom Aspinall's a mango. All right, dude. Next up on this list, we're going to talk about Joshua Van. I think Joshua Van is a blueberry for a different reason than Derek Lewis. Because I said that Derek Lewis would be a blueberry because of how round and rotund he is and, you know, his physical shape. But Joshua Van, I feel like, would be more of a blueberry because, you know, blueberries kind of, they go under the radar. But you know that you know a blueberry is good for you if you're educated on your food groups. You know that a blueberry is good for you once you bite into it. So you know you're willing to, you know, you're gonna take that. Are you gonna take that blueberry? Are you gonna eat that blueberry? Once you eat, you know, a lot of blueberries, and once you see a lot of Joshua Van fights, you start to realize that Joshua Van is an absolutely sick fighter, and you know he's putting on that show every single time. And once you keep eating blueberries, and you're eating more blueberries, you know, you're not eating as many cookies. You're eating blueberry. And subbing it out for, you know, the other like artificial sugar that you've been eating, like Chips Ahoy. You know, you're subbing that out for blueberries. You keep eating blueberries. You keep watching Joshua Van fights. You see where I'm going with this analogy? And those blueberries keep getting you healthier. You know, you're getting happier. You know, that's what a Joshua Van fight does to you when you watch enough of them. Joshua Van is always putting on bangers every fight except for the Pantoja fight. You know what I'm saying? Celebrating after he fluked my boy. I don't like that, but Joshua Van is the absolute GOAT when he fights inside the octagon. Always active. You know, he's like a blueberry in the sense that if a blueberry, you know, blueberries are very good for you. And once you eat enough blueberries, you know, you're going to start feeling that effect. You're going to start feeling great. And that's what happens when you watch enough Joshua Van fights. All right, dude. Next up on this list, Sean O'Malley. I think Sean O'Malley blends right in with the bananas that we've got here. Sean O'Malley's fight style, you know, he's waiting. He's a bit of a, you know, point fighter to open it out with. Doesn't really get hit in that, but once he hits you, you know, it's like, oh, you know, he's hitting you. You know, he's piecing you up on the outside. All of a sudden, you get 1, 2. You know, lean back 2, 3. You know, he's really piecing you up. He doesn't throw that many hooks, but you know, 1, 2, bang, 1, 2. You know, or 2, 1. He's piecing you up on the outside. He's switching stances, low kicks, high kicks. You know, very vibrant fight style. He's got, you know, the colored hair and all that. He's got the owl tattoo. It's super colorful. He's got the, you know, he's just a very swaggy finesse type of fighter. And Sean O'Malley's one of my favorite fighters as well. I think he blends right in with the bananas. You know, he's got that flexibility with his high kicks and his, you know, flashy, spindly, spider-like attacks like Mauricio Huffy. And I'm like a fucking spider lad, you know, like Paddy Pimblett, bro. He's got, dude, he's gonna catch you with these angles, and I feel like bananas, as I talked about with the flexibility of the bananas can also be very flashy in their personalities as well. Like when they jump out at you and they're blending from green to yellow, you know, in their colors. I feel like Sean O'Malley just fits right in with the bananas. All right, dude. Next up on this list, we are going to put Israel Adesanya, Izzy. We're going to put Izzy in the tier with the oranges. I feel like Izzy fits right in with the oranges. Once again, a very zesty brother. I think Izzy fits right in with the oranges because, you know, like sometimes like you're conditioned to look at an orange and be like, ooh, it's going to be sour when I eat it. Ooh, am I going to, you know, get to the seed of the orange and accidentally bite into that when I eat it? But, you know, it's like, you're thinking like you know what to expect with these oranges, and you know, and Adesanya, you know, tries to be a very vibrant personality. You know, he's got all the tats. You know, he's got that kickboxing career. He's always on social media, chronically online, trying to come up with the corny one-liners at the pressers, walking out with Jabberwockies, and you know, doing all the dance, you know, like the you know, all that type of stuff. Once he gets to the octagon, he's low kicking you at range. For the most part, there'll be times where he catches Pereira and sleeps him out cold. Nowadays it's a bit different, but historically Izzy has been kind of an orange, you know, an orange maxer when he fights. Now I don't have much more of an explanation with it other than, you know, Izzy's a bit zesty. He is a bit zesty, man. It's the thing with the CKB gym, except, oh, I mean, I guess Volk's out of there now, but, and I guess Izzy is out of the CKB gym now, and that's why he's getting more normal. I actually kind of like Izzy now, but, yeah. I feel like Izzy's an orange. All right, dude. Next up on this list, I'm going to say Islam Makhachev is the next guy we put on this list. And I think, hence the thumbnail, I spoiled it for you guys with the thumbnail, but we got Islam Applechev. I think that Islam Applechev, it's a pretty creative name, but I think Islam Applechev would be quite the apple. And I don't know why, man. I just feel like he's an apple. I feel like he's more of a Fuji apple than even an Arman Sarukian. Because at least Arman Sarukian's got, I mean, I guess Islam Makhachev's got the personality. He's an all right guy and all that. And he's got like the send him to Uzbekistan and forget. And, he's got like a couple of the memes. But I feel like he's like, when you're watching his fight style, he's much more of a Fuji apple than an Arman Sarukian. Nowadays Makhachev goes to a couple more decisions. He's more of a grapple first guy. And when he's grappling, he doesn't look for the submission unless you make a major mistake and it presents itself. So I do think that Islam Applechev would be quite the apple. And, if you just look at Islam Makhachev, like, I feel like looking at Makhachev's face just makes me think of an apple for some reason. Like, there's some guys that you just look at their builds or you look at their facial structures and you just think they're an apple or like some type of, or not animal, like some type of different fruit. Like, dude, like I look at Mauricio Huffy, he looks like a banana, man. Maybe that's because Lucas Tracy put that in my head, but you look at Islam Applechev, he looks like an apple. Same thing with Apple Sarukian. He looks like an apple, man. You look at Big Ankh here, he looks like a pear. He does look like a pear. So I think that Islam Applechev is an apple, all right, dude? Next up on this list, I'm going to put Josh Hokit. Along with Applechev, along with Apple Sarukian, along with Applechev, we got, I don't know what happened. We got Josh Hokit. I don't really have an Apple-related name to him. I guess Max Holloway is Max Appleway. I feel like apple's a very flexible word to put in these names, but Josh Hokit, I feel like he's an apple, like Hokit is like a red Honeycrisp apple compared to Makhachev being a green apple, I feel like, you know what I'm saying? He's just I know I said Makhachev was a Fuji apple, but I feel like that's more Arman Sarukian because Arman Sarukian gives me that more Fuji apple feeling because the Fuji apple's red. I feel like Islam Applechev would be more of like a, what's that green apple called? Like a green granny apple or whatever the hell you call it. But I feel like that would be Islam Makhachev. He'd be one of those granny apples or whatever the hell you call them. He'd be a green apple. And because the green apples, it's just like, I feel like you're conditioned to know that a green apple ain't going to taste that great and it's not going to pop out at you like a Honeycrisp. But, Hokit's got that vibrant style. He's borderline banana, with the vibrant personality. He's borderline strawberry, but I feel like the strawberries are just a bit different than what Hokit presents himself as. Like Hokit's like this pro wrestling character, and when he fights, he's always putting on bangers. He's always going to war, throwing a bunch of strikes, gassing out. Takes a 15-second break, and then all of a sudden hits you with the 6-punch combo, like from the depths of hell. He's just bang, 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 just absolutely spazzing out on you. And I feel like that's what a Honeycrisp apple does, man. That's what he does. Josh Hokit, man, he's an apple. He's a Honeycrisp apple at that. When you watch the Josh Hokit fights, just like when you bite into a Honeycrisp apple, you're getting what he's selling. You're like, dude, it's just like, I mean, it's a little bit different than Max Holloway because Max Holloway isn't like really like when Max Holloway's on fight week, we're getting fight on Saturday night. It is what it is, brother. It is what it is. What, and do what you do. Like that's Max Holloway on fight week. But Josh Hokit on fight week, I'm going to chama on your mama. Alex Pereira, chama these nuts. Michelle Obama is a man. Josh Hokit is just putting on that pro wrestling character during fight week. And that's why Josh Hokit's an apple in my eyes. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Quillen Salkild. He's an important fighter to add, especially after his great performance this last week. I'm still riding the high from it. If you guys saw my reaction on TikTok from one of my clippers, I was absolutely... Dude, I was going crazy. And I do run part of that account as well, but I'm not talking in the third person, so my captions on that account aren't me talking. It's another guy who's clipping me. But yeah, Quillen Salkild, man. I think Quillen Salkild fits right along with these bananas right here. And Yeah, you look at him, you look at the lanky frame, 6 foot at lightweight, just as Mauricio Huffy is. He's a banana. And then you look at, how Quillen Salkill dresses outside the octagon, how he's, all the memes about him, the CEO of sex, or no, the inventor of sex, it's like, what else do they call him? They call him something about gambling. You got all the Quillen Salkill, the Gartha memes. Dude, Quillen Salkill, in the way that he dresses, he's got the shades and the leather jackets. He wears some zesty crop tops. The baggy jeans. Dude, Quillen Salkill is a banana, man. He is peacock maxing, but he's not peacock maxing really like in oranges. Like an orange is real zesty with it. But then you see like the performances of Quillen Salkill inside the octagon. He ain't going there for war. He's going there to finish the fight as quick as possible, with the exception of a long Lash Moves fight where he mixed in the wrestling. But, dude, Quillen Salkill just fits right in with the bananas. Very lanky and long for the division. And a banana's very lanky and long. And a banana, I feel like he's one of the ripe bananas. He's more green than he is yellow. I don't know. Dude, I don't know what I'm talking about at this point. But yeah, Quillen Salkill's banana, all right, dude. Next up on this list, we're going to put Ian Gary. We're going to put Ian Gary on this list up next. And yeah, man, I think Ian Gary is Ian Perry. There's a lot of funny jokes that you can make with these fruits in the fighters' names. But yeah, I think that Ian Gary is Ian Perry right here, and he's a pair. You know what I'm saying? If you didn't just see him pop up on the screen right here, he is a pair. If you're noticing a trend with these fighters in the pair tier, I don't like them. I don't like these fighters in the pair tier. And Ian Gary's fight style does also match up with a pair, like just based off of his record, and how he LARPs as McGregor, says he's the next coming of McGregor. You would think that his fight style is like, oh my gosh, he's KOing everyone. He's got the Faraz Sahabi touch of death. As Joe Rogan likes to say, that McGregor had. But he really doesn't. He's a very good fighter inside the octagon, but he's very bland when he fights. He's not KOing people. He's never KOing people except for Song Kanan and D-Rod, you know what I'm saying? Who are, chinny chinsters. So I think that Ian Gary's a pair. I don't really feel like I need much else to say, you just bite into the pair, and the pair is, just like you watch an Ian Gary fight, and the Ian Gary fight's boring, kind of as you expect if you know who he is. And same thing with, familiarizing yourself with the taste of a pear, biting into a pear, and you're like, yeah, it kind of tastes like, spinach or, a cabbage head. So we're going to move on to the next guy on this tier list, or the next fruit on this tier list. Diego Lopez. I do feel like Diego Lopez is a mango, and I know he's a bit different from a JDM or a Tom Aspinall, but you look at the personality, man, and I know he's like, he's a bit more peacock maxing than a JDM and Tom Aspinall, but he still kind of goes under the radar, Like he's peacock maxing a little bit with his cowboy hat and kind of aura farming at the pressers. But other than his aura farming, his responses at the pressers, are usually in very broken English, where Dana thinks that it's him speaking in Spanish or Portuguese. You know what I'm saying? And he's just like putting together his sentences. He's working very hard on learning English, and he's putting together his sentences, man. And he's like just delivering very short, simple responses, not trying to start anything at the press conferences. Unless Yair Rodriguez says something, then he steps to it because he's got problems with Yair Rodriguez, obviously. But still don't know why the UFC hasn't made that fight. But just like a mango, man, he goes under the radar. You watch a fight out of any of these guys in the mango tier list. You watch a fight of JDM, you watch a fight of Tom Aspinall, you watch a fight of Diego Lopez. They're always entertaining. You know what I'm saying? Like, you look at the mango and you're like, yeah, it's, what type of fruit is that? Some people don't even know what a mango is. And then you bite into it and you're like, oh, this mango is pretty damn good. And that's what I feel like, watching a Diego Lopez fight is like. He don't got the biggest personality on fight week. He's not really saying anything of substance, but then you get to watch a Diego Lopez fight, and it's like, holy shit, this guy's an insane fighter. This guy's a sick fighter. He's got insane power for featherweight, so I don't know why the hell he's moving up to lightweight. I do think that's a bit of a bad decision for him, because he's just going to blend in more with the power of, these 155ers. I do think that Charles Oliveira may find that chin that's very hittable and maybe finish him. But yeah, I think that Diego Lopez is a mango, and he goes under the radar for sure. All right, dude, next up on this list, Alex Pereira. Chama, D's nuts. I think that Alex Pereira is actually quite the strawberry. He doesn't really shit talk that much, but like when he does, it's just him saying Chama or responded to, to something that Hokit says. But like, dude, he gets mad sometimes. Like he was getting intense with Yuri in that second fight. Obviously he had his little beef with Jamal Hill. In that second fight with Ankh, he carried some saltiness with him over maybe some things that Ankh had said to him or something like that. But yeah, I mean, Alex Pereira, I feel like Alex Pereira is quite the strawberry, you know what I'm saying? Because, you maybe look at him at the press conferences, all he's saying is Chama, he's just... Well, this is from the point of view of somebody who's not familiar with Alex Pereira. He's just he's kind of aura farming at the press conferences, not really saying much, not trying to put himself too far out there. But then you watch one of his fights, and he's an absolute marauder, man. He's piecing you up with the calf kicks at one moment, and then all of a sudden he's dropping bombs on you. All of a sudden question mark kick hits you straight in the dome, and you're down. That's Alex Pereira, and I feel like it's kind of the thing with a strawberry, like a strawberry, you look at it and it's like, yeah, this is a strawberry, but maybe you forget what a strawberry tastes like in this scenario. Like all these strawberries here are different. I feel like Ilya and Talbot are a bit similar, but Pereira's kind of the outlier of a strawberry, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like Josh Hokit's the outlier of an apple here, and Olberg may be the outlier of a pear where he's actually quite entertaining. Yeah, and Pereira's kind of an outlier of a strawberry here. So, yeah, that's my explanation for Pereira. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, I got Dricus du Plessis next up on this tier list, man. And I think that he would be quite the banana. And it's kind of based off of looking at him, and also, based off of, how he responds at press conferences. He doesn't really beef with guys unless they start it. However, his responses at pressers, against Izzy, he was absolutely cooking Izzy in the presser, as we all know. And, he was cooking Strickland in that first presser. They didn't really have much going on in the second one. But, man, yeah, DDP, he's putting himself out there with his personality. DDP's got a big personality, if he's provoked. And also, the thing with DDP is he does look like a banana a little bit. Like he's kind of got that yellow skin going on here if you really look closely. And I brought up that same thing with Paddy Pimblett, and you kind of do see some yellowish brown, maybe like a really, I don't know what you call it, maybe like a really old banana with some bruises on it. I feel like Mauricio Huffy could be. But yeah, I think that DDP is just a banana. You look at the yellow skin. He's got some yellow, especially going on this shoulder right here. And you look at the fight style. The fight style is a banana's fight style for sure. Very slick, like kind of like a brute fight style. You know what I'm saying? Like I could put him with the apples, because I feel like the apples are very like brutal and physically imposing with their fight style. But I do feel like DDP just looks more like a banana. So that's why I'm going to put him in the tier with the bananas. All right, dude. Next up on this list, I'm going to put Charles Oliveira here with the blueberries. As I said, a lot of these fruits differ, man. And I think that Charles Oliveira is a different blueberry than the rest, Like, I feel like blueberries are also very respectful people for the most part, or respectful fruits. I feel like a blueberry, really honors its environment. You know what I'm saying? Blueberries are very good for you. Charles Oliveira is a very nice guy. And blueberries are, a superfood. Blueberries are very good fruits for you. And Charles Oliveira is I know I just said that. I don't know, I'm repeating myself, but Charles Oliveira, you look at the fight style, very entertaining and, good for you to watch for the most part, except for his last fight, which was outlier in like all of his fights in the UFC, and he's had a lot. But yeah, I do think that Charles Oliveira is more of a blueberry than anything, just based off of his personality, how nice he is. And, his fights are entertaining, man. Excuse me. I'm very burpy right now. I've been talking for a while. It's been like 45 minutes. All right, dude. Next up on this list, I'm going to put Justin Gaethje in here. And I think that Justin Gaethje is another outlier of an apple. I think that Justin Gaethje is a Honey Crisp apple. I think that just like Holloway, like Hogan, maybe he's not much of an outlier. Maybe I'm just putting Islam Applechev in here just because he seems like an apple to me, Like, when you're looking at these apples, this is a Honey Crisp. This is a Fuji. This is a Granny's apple or whatever it is, the green one. And then you got a Honeycrisp and a Honeycrisp. I think that Justin Gaethje is kind of a Honeycrisp apple, just like Hokit and just like Holloway. Because when you watch his fights, it's always entertaining. It's always a brawl. Justin Gaethje is always there to entertain. He's always there to get his bonus for fight of the night because that's what he usually does. This is what he does, mate. And yeah, I think that he's an apple. I think that he's a Honeycrisp. Next up on this list, I'm going to put Petr Yan. Petr Yan. I think that Petr Yan is actually quite the strawberry. You know what I'm saying? This might be a hot take, but I think that Petr Yan is actually quite the strawberry. You could put him in there with the blueberries. Because or you could put him in there with the mangoes, actually, because Petr Yan does go under the radar a little bit. And I think that, he's been shit talking a little bit more recently. And when you you really can't tell with the shit talking because he doesn't speak like a lick of English, except for like, hello, Chicago. And then he does like the little whistle. I can't whistle. But he does actually shit talk a little bit, but he does it in Russian. Like he called O'Malley in the presser at UFC 280. He said that he was like a whore on the side of the road, or he said he looks like a prostitute on the side of the street or something like that. And then, he said he was basically calling out Merab for being gay at the press conference. Literally 10-7 to Merab at the press conference. And Merab doesn't usually lose press conferences for some reason, even though, he doesn't really have much substance to what he's saying. He's kind of just like energy mogging you at the press conference. But Petr Yan literally 10-7 Merab and was like digging deep blows at him, trying to get into his head at the press conference. So I think that when you look at, a Petr Yan and you really listen to him talk, deep down, he is a strawberry with how he looks. Yeah, or not with how he looks, with like how he acts and how he conducts himself. He's a bit of a strawberry, and he's also a shorter guy, which, strawberries are pretty short fruits. And I feel like Petr Yan fits that physical mold of a strawberry. And then when you see him fight, he completely fits the mold of a strawberry with his fight style. Being very exuberant, with how he, his boxing is very crisp, obviously. The spinning attacks, back fists, spinning heel kicks. That spinning back fist into the left hook is always a sick combo that he throws. That's when he's really styling on you. His kicks, liver kicking Merab and making him scream. His sweeps are also sick. Whenever he's wrestling, he's always going to posture up and, bring the violence. And, that's kind of what a strawberry does when you bite into it once again. A strawberry's taste is, very sour, it's very sour, but it's also a blend of like sweetness, sour, and natural sugar. And I feel like that's like you get like these, it's just like a great taste, when you're watching a Petr Yan fight, compared to eating a strawberry. I feel like that's a good analogy to put it as, but I know I worded that weirdly. But yeah, we're gonna move on to the next guy on this tier list, Merab Dvalishvili. I think that Merab is probably a banana, man. I think that Merab's just a bit of a banana. I know that you could technically put him as an apple, but you could have him as like a Fuji or a Granny's apple. But I think that he's a bit of a banana. He's got kind of that personality that a banana would, just kind of like jumping at you like, hey, man, I take these guys to my jacuzzi. Hey, man, you want to go to my jacuzzi? Hell, Joe, I love you. I watch from distance as you become champion. Oh my God. And he's just like, constantly bombarding you with, random stuff that he's saying. You from Dagestan, you from Mountain Umar. And he's driving around the couch, around the Vegas Strip. He's very exuberant nowadays with his personality. And that's why, he's a more bearable champ than, different other smudge grapplers and other, quite boring fighters in the octagon. And, he kind of flies under the radar, and a lot of people don't call him boring just because of how, exuberant his personality is. And he's always emoting on you and taunting in the cage after slamming you on your head or taking you down. I feel like Merab's a bit of a banana, you know what I'm saying? We're going to move on to the next guy on this tier list. We got 10 more, I believe. My throat's really hurting me right now because of how much I'm talking. But the next guy on this tier list that I'm going to put on here is actually Arnold Allen, another guy that really flies under the radar. And I'm going to put Arnold Allen in the mango tier. I think that Arnold Allen is actually quite the mango. Once again, he flies under the radar more so than Diego Lopez. I feel like, these British slash Aussie guys, they do fly under the radar a bit, and they're not really talking much. They're just not really throwing themselves out there all that much, because when they get in the cage, they're going to back it up. Arnold Allen does have a lot of decisions on his record. But when Arnold Allen gets in that octagon, it's going to be a war. He's going to be jabbing you up. He'll work his way into the inside, he'll land a nasty right hand on you, really, utilizing his jab and his low kicks. Arnold Allen is, dude, he's a very entertaining fighter, but he flies under the radar once again because he is a mango, and mangoes fly under the radar because, they're not really promoting themselves all that much. How much do you really see? Like when you look at the shelves in the grocery store, in the fruit section, how much do you really see, a nice looking mango? You don't really see those mangoes because the stores don't really promote them all that much. Like Arnold Allen is not that much of a promotable guy outside of his fight style, because, he's not really putting himself out there that much, or, like Hokit maxing or becoming a wrestling character. He's just, kind of very quiet and reserved, always posting shit about his cat on his story, on his IG stories. Yeah, I mean, he's always talking about his cat, like in the in the pre-fight interviews at Media Day on Fight Week, he's always talking about his cat to the media. He's a very interesting guy, and he's different. And, he doesn't really get much credit or much promotion from it. And, like when you see an Arnold Allen edit on TikTok, it's got like maybe 1,000 likes. It's not going viral, as all these like, the badass John Jones edits that's, painting him like this guy who's finishing everyone in every fight, even though he's not. You see like a John Jones edit, it's like a badass fight, and it's like the reigning, defending, undisputed UFC lightweight or light heavyweight champion of the world, John Jones. And then you see like an Arnold Allen edit, and it's like a nice little funky, happy, upbeat song, and it's like an anime song, like a super kawaii anime song, and it's just like and it may have like a pink filter on it or something, and it's like Arnold Allen highlights, maybe him talking about his cat in a clip before, posting, I forget what his cat's name is, but yeah, I mean, Arnold Allen, he really flies under the radar just like a mango, and that's why he's with the mangoes in this tier. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Ayman Zahabi, man. I feel like Ayman Zahabi would be a pair. We've got another pair on this tier list, and he's here with the pairs, Cyril Pear, Carlos Pearberg, Magomed Perkalaev, Ian Perry, and Ayman Zaperi. I don't know how to really mix in that pair into the names here, but Ayman Zahabi's a hard one to mix in. But Ayman Zahabi's a pair. I feel like his fights he kind of puts on bangers sometimes, but the personality's very bland. All he's really got is that he looks a lot like Ariel Helwani. He likes to say that he looks like Drake, buddy. You don't look like Drake, man. You look like Ariel Helwani. There's a big difference, man. He looks exactly like Ariel Helwani, and his fight style, man. He's just kind of, throwing up weird blocks. He's going to his Philly shell and, throwing up all this. And he also gets a lot of robberies in his fights. He robbed Aldo. He robbed Chito Vera, even though I don't really care that Chito Vera lost that fight because he doesn't really do much until the third round. But Chito Vera did take a round off of him before the third. So I think that Ayman Zahabi's up here with the pairs, despite him having a decently entertaining fight style. He's just kind of annoying to watch, him spamming leg kicks on O'Malley and like running into them. For some reason, he thought that was the game plan, which was interesting. And it wasn't really working. O'Malley wasn't checking them, but he said on the podcast with MMA Guru that it wasn't working. So, Yeah, I think that Zahabi is a pair. All right, dude. Next up on this list, jeez, guys. Next up on this tier list, Hamzat Chimaev. I think that Hamzat Chimaev is actually going to go with the oranges here. Interestingly enough, I know he doesn't really fit the mold of Morales, Dan Hooker, Israel Adesanya, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you got Hamzat Chimaev. I know it's weird, but I feel like Hamzat Chimaev is an orange just because of, he's like, on the outside, he's just like, oh, I smash everybody, kill everybody. And he's just kind of got that like sourness to him, when you see him in there. And then like he gets in the octagon, he's kind of backing it up. For the most part, he's backing it up, except for the DDP and Strickland fights. He's backing it up most of the time when he gets in the octagon because he is mostly a marauder when he gets into that octagon. He's smash everybody, kill everybody, and then he runs at you to start out the fight, takes you down. He's always getting the takedown. So, in orange, with how an orange looks, an orange looks like it's going to be zesty. He's kind of backing it up when he's, running at you in the first 10 seconds of the fight to take you down. So yeah, that's why I've got him in the orange tier. You could put him in the tier with the pairs, but I feel like that might have been a bit of disrespect to Hamzat just because he's got like 12 finishes in his career out of 16 fights compared to I know Gans had a couple of finishes as well, but Gans getting robbed by Volkov, which is annoying, and constantly cheating in every fight. Or no, not getting robbed by Volkov, robbing Volkov. Goldberg's just, completely bland personality. Same thing with Ankalaev, boring fight style as well. Ian Gary, boring fight style, weird personality. And Ayman Zahabi is just there. So I feel like Hamzat could be a pair, but I feel like that would be too much disrespect to put him in here with the pairs right here. So I'm going to put Hamzat with the oranges here. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Conor McGregor. If you were to come back and fight somebody, I am the most entertaining lightweight on the planet. I'm going to put Michael Chandler in this tier list. I think he's an apple. I think Michael Chandler is an apple. You look at his beard, not his beard, his build. You look at Michael Chandler's build and he just kind of looks like that Honeycrisp apple to you, very shiny, great physique, Yeah, great physique, and he's very explosive once he gets at you in that first round. Very entertaining fight style. He's a Honeycrisp apple for sure. He looks the part, and then he's running at you in that first round. I'm talking about prime Chandler here. But then once he slows down in that second round and the third round, then you can start really breaking him. His prime. I think that part of his prime did extend to the Paddy fight, but then dude, his durability just completely left him, and he got finished by Paddy. And then the Mauricio Huffy fight, Mauricio Huffy just absolutely destroyed him. But yeah, I think that Chandler's quite the apple. I feel like it's more of the aesthetic and the look of Chandler, the physique, how he looks like kind of just like this little pit bull. He's got a very little build, but he's very shiny with it, and an apple is very shiny. A Honeycrisp apple is very shiny, so that's why I've got Chandler in here with the apples. All right, dude. Next up on this list, Alessandro Pantoja. I think that he's a very humble and reserved, for the most part, blueberry. I think he's in here with the blueberries, because he goes under the radar just a little bit. He like blueberries. Everybody knows about a blueberry. Blueberries. Like the box of blueberries is right in front of you once you enter the store if you're looking at the fruit section. But at the same time, some people will pass over the blueberries, but then some people know how good, the blueberries actually are for you. And, you can't pass over a Pantoja fight. Like you can't look at him, kind of not much responses at the press conference, not really doing much at the press conference. You can't just, look past him. You can't just look past, the fact that he don't got much of a personality, let's be honest. Like now he's starting to say, I'm going to make he suffer when he's talking about Van. Now he's starting to kind of spice it up a bit. He's starting to have his little beef with Van. He's staring him down at when Van was getting the Vaseline on his face at UFC 328. But now, I think that Pantoja, for the most part, is blueberry, because he watches his fight style, and he's very entertaining, never miss a Pantoja fight. And yeah, he's a great fighter, and blueberries are great for you. So that's why I kind of made that analogy there. And that's why I think that Alessandro Pantoja would be a blueberry. All right, dude. Next up on this list, Sean Strickland, the great American hope. I'm getting that shirt from Full Violence like pretty soon. So Shout out Full Violence for that shirt. But Sean Strickland, man, I think that Sean Strickland would actually be quite the banana, yeah. And this is where like kind of the difference in personalities, range here in the bananas. Like you got Mauricio Huffy, super humble, reserved guy, doesn't speak any English. But he just looks like a banana, Then you got Sean Strickland, who I feel like is the definition of a banana, he's just a banana, man. He's like he's got a long frame, he's a pretty average frame for a middleweight. But at the same time, he's got like this like smoothness to him. I don't know. He's got like a smoothness to his fight style, with like just throwing the jab out there, throwing the jab, throwing the jab, throwing the jab. And I feel like a banana's either going to be very smooth and silky and always getting the finishes, or it's just going to be controlling you. It's going to be dominating you. I feel like Sean Strickland's just like a middle-aged banana. I'm saying, like a completely yellow banana. Like you got like the ripe bananas here, like not Patty Pimblett, like a Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley would be a very ripe, vibrant banana. Same thing with Salkild and DDP for the most part, and Patty's more of just a yellow banana just because of how he looks. But then you got Strickland, who I feel like would be just a completely solid yellow banana, you know what I'm saying? And, his personality jumps out at you as well, obviously, saying whatever he wants on social media. At the press conference, he's going crazy, starting race wars, starting, crusades with Hamzat Chimaev. So yeah, I mean, he's a very, very interesting personality, but I think that he'd fit more into that banana mold here than the strawberry mold, because when I look at the strawberries, I'm thinking of guys that really back up their they back up their personality or their aura in the octagon. But I think that Strickland for most of the time just kind of controls you here in the octagon. So I'm gonna say that Strickland is quite the banana. All right, dude. Next up on this list. We're at an hour now, but we're going to finish up pretty soon. We've got 5 left. So next up on this list, Alexander Volkanovski might... wait a second. Hold on now. I'm looking at 2 people in the same one. So yeah, maybe we have one. Maybe we have one more than that. Maybe we have 6. But Alexander Volkanovski's next up on this tier list. Yeah, I think that Volk would be a mango because, at the same time, like Volk's very popular. It doesn't really go under the radar that much like the mangoes do. But at the same time, he doesn't talk himself up that much. He's just pretty humble at the pressers. Occasionally, he'll sing a song mocking Diego Lopez, like, because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you. Over again, don't make me change my mind. Like sometimes he'll throw that in there. Sometimes he does like the little cooking with Volk thing. Sometimes he's beefing with Max for some reason in the third fight. Just because Max decided to like actually talk some shit in that presser and say, "I am the heat, brother. I am the heat," which is tough. But yeah, I think Volk's quite the mango. I just feel like he is, I guess it's like kind of an Aussie and Brit thing here to be a mango, just ignore my friend Diego right here. But yeah, I think that Volk's quite the mango. I don't really have much of an explanation for it, but yeah, he's there. So next up on this tier list, I'm going to put Nasruddin Imavov in here with the pairs. I think he fits perfectly with the pairs. Cyril Gane, his fellow French brethren, and then you got all the other boring personalities here, with Ian Gary being the exception because of how goofy he is and how memeable he is. But you got Nasruddin Imavov here. Just the reason he hasn't gotten a title shot yet is because of how boring of a personality he is. He literally sits back and lets the UFC kind of cuck him because. Yeah, he doesn't, he'll make his demand on Twitter, but like he's not, promoting the fight. Actually, the UFC has told him that that he will be the next fight for Strickland, I guess. So, I guess they're gonna do that. But Imavov is just kind of a pair, man, bland, just like the rest of his fellow pairs here. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, who am I going to put? Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, Yuri Prochazka is next up. Or no, not Yuri Prochazka. I'm gonna put Gene Silva here first. Gene Silva is next up on this tier list. And I think that Gene Silva actually quite fits in with these oranges here. I'm saying? I think he fits in with the oranges just because, there's just something about him, like some aura about him that I think he's an orange. I can't put him with the unlikable fighters in the pair tier, just because, he's a very, very entertaining fighter and he comes to scrap every single time. But I do feel like he's a bit of an orange, because, what you're seeing and what he's selling, him barking and autism maxing and screaming and crying at the belt, which is still a pretty funny clip. I feel like what he's selling is what you're getting. You know what I'm saying? Like, you look at an orange and, you're thinking off of, your taste bud memory that this is going to be a sweet, sour, treat of a fruit. And you bite into the orange, and that's exactly what you're getting. And I feel like that's what we're getting with every time Gene Silva fights. And, he's always going to be barking at the pressers and at, media day. He's going to be, doing some weird things with his aura. And Bryce Mitchell calling him a demon. I don't even blame Bryce Mitchell for that. But, yeah, I think Gene Silva's an orange. All right, dude. Next up on this tier list, Yuri Prochazka. I'm going to put Yuri Prochazka with the strawberries here. I think he's quite the crafty strawberry. I think that Yuri Prochazka, I know that Yuri Prochazka's fight style is very, very entertaining. Literal killer be killed fighter, as literal as it gets. He's only won by one decision in his career, and every single time that he's lost, he's been either submitted or KO'd. That's Yuri for you. You know what I'm saying? He's the literal definition of killer be killed. All finishes or being finished inside the UFC. And a strawberry, as I've said before, you look at a strawberry and it's excuse me, and it's going to be, it's going to taste that certain way. It's going to taste very sour, very sweet. A strawberry is going to have that taste to it. And, that what you're getting in a Yuri Prochazka fight, you're going to get a very wild fight. You're going to get a very, very wild fight out of Yuri. And you're going to get a very wild taste most of the time out of strawberry. But, you're expecting it most of the time because you know what a strawberry tastes like. At least most people do. And that's exactly what you're getting with the Yuri Prochazka fight. And he backs up, the weird antics that he's doing in the forest, hitting the tree, meditating, spending 6 months on AFK mode, just, being a samurai and meditating in the middle of the woods. You know what I'm saying? That's just Yuri, man. Yuri's a weird guy, interesting personality as well. And that's why I put him with the strawberries, because the strawberries, have that kind of peacocking to their personalities, kind of like the oranges do. The strawberries and the oranges are pretty similar, except the oranges are a bit zestier. But Khamzat Chimaev and Gene Silva are the outliers here. But, I've explained why these guys are here. But yeah, same thing with Yuri Prochazka. I think he's a strawberry. Last guy I'm going to put on this tier list is Tai Tuivasa. He's a round, gelatinous blueberry. The Australian flag is also blue, so that's, another kind of aesthetic that I chose to put him here with the blueberries. He's a pretty humble guy for the most part, but when he fights, if he's getting a win, which I don't think he'll ever get a win again, considering how Louis Sutherland just performed in this last fight. I think that he's quite the blueberry, and when he gets a win, when he got a win, because once again I don't think he's getting a win again. He's always doing the shoey, he's drinking beer out the shoe, Ty's a blueberry. Tai is a blueberry because there's not much going on before the fight. Except for him just being fat and chilling, and that's kind of what a blueberry does when it's in your fruit bowl. It's just being fat, being big and gelatinous and juicy, and it's just laying there. And that's kind of what Tai Tuivasa does when he's not fighting. So this is my list of, if they were a fruit, what would these UFC fighters be? And we've got a lot of bananas, a couple of apples and pears, and then an equal amount here of strawberries, blueberries, mangoes, and oranges. So yeah, these are what each UFC fighter would be if they were a fruit. I know I left a lot of guys out, but tell me in the comments which guys I left out. Who did you want to see on this tier list? What fruit would they be? What fruits did I leave out on the descriptions right here? So like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Follow my socials at TheJJMMA. I'll see you guys later, and until next time, goodbye.